Finally, the final defenseman on the list, coming in at number 3 overall in your top 20, Charlie. Oliver Bonk. Is he going to get a 9-game tryout?
I'd be surprised. Brent Flair did not rule it out. He basically said, hey, we'll see how he does. But he also, I think the money quote here, when I asked him that, the end one was, we'll see where it goes. He's still 19 years old. That tells me probably not. What I've heard is that Torts really likes Oliver Bonk. I have a suspicion that John Tortorella would not have a problem if they gave Bonk an audition. I don't think the Flyers are into giving him an audition. And I do think part of it may be the Andre thing, is that Andre got that early look. Again, he was a guy that I think Torts wanted to get the early look. He was in over his head, and then it took him a few weeks back down in the minors to sort of get his head back screwed on right and get back playing the way he should. I don't think they want to do that same thing to Bonk. I think they want to have Bonk at camp for a bit, to be sure. He might stay longer at camp than most of the junior guys do. Like, I think they're going to send Barkey back early. He might get a preseason game, same thing he did last year. But I think they'll send him back pretty early. Bonk could stay longer because they want to get a longer look at him because the coaching staff likes him. I would be very surprised if he gets the 9-game audition. I guess, again, and I said this in our Discord this morning when people were talking about might this guy make it? Might this guy make it? The wild card is always injuries. If a bunch of guys on the back end get hurt, maybe they say, hey, Bonk's the best performing guy. Like, out of that group that I just mentioned, the Ginning, Adder, McDonald, Andre group, if Bonk outplays them all and 2 guys that are projected to be starters get injured, maybe he does get the audition because Torts is like, hey, I'm in the business of winning games here.
Yeah.
You're coaching me to win games. This guy helps me win games the most. You got to give him to me for a couple weeks. Maybe they do it. But barring a bad run of injuries in camp and preseason, I think they send him back right away. I think they send him back to London and say, just kill it down there for a season. You're going to be one of the big minute guys on the Canadian juniors team, World Juniors team in December and January. You're going to be a key guy on one of the favorites to win the Memorial Cup again in London. Just dominate. We're just going to puff your tires up all year. Everybody's going to be telling you how great you are. You're going to be able to make all these, big plays because you have all the confidence in the world. Just do that for a year and then show up to camp next year and, hey, maybe you make the team out of camp next season.
I think like all that was cool. And they're like, yeah, maybe. But we talked about in the past, like at development camp, Bonk was asked, hey, he was like, I'm going back to juniors. Like, that's pretty much what's happening. And while that's in all likelihood the outcome, they don't want him thinking that.
No, they don't.
They want
They want him pushing
They
for a
want
spot.
that group of guys all pushing each other to see if they can oust one of the 6 or 7 who are locks to be here in all likelihood. But I think the most encouraging thing I read was they are not fooled by the offensive numbers. Like, while, that's great, and maybe that will be a part of his game, and maybe he can play that specialized position, and maybe the numbers will propel his confidence to to make more plays offensively because he's had some success in that way. Yeah. But ultimately, we know what he is, and he's probably not going to play the bumper in the NHL. So, those numbers might not translate. And they weren't like, oh, my God, we have this guy who's going to be...
He's going to score 50 every year. Yeah.
This is why we didn't take Zeev. That's
they didn't make that argument.
They didn't have that sort of thought process, and that's good for a team that I think has been delusional in the past about some of its prospects.
Yeah, I also think, too, that if you look at the back end this year in the NHL, and again, fingers crossed with injuries, I think they look at the big project this season on defense in the NHL is Drysdale. That's going to be the developmental focus for Bradshaw and for the coaching staff. And if you throw the blue chip defense prospect that they have, I don't think Oliver Bonk is going to be a star, but I definitely think he's a B-plus level prospect. As I said earlier in the show, him and Luchenko are 2 guys who very easily could be the centerpiece of a deal that brings back a 1C or a 1D or whatever. That's the level of prospect that Matvei Michkov level prospects don't get traded. I know everyone wants more Matvei Michkov level prospects because that's awesome, but you know what? You don't get those guys and then flip them. you flip the Bonks and the Luchenkos. So they have a couple of them if they need to make a big move and they need a big centerpiece if a really good guy becomes available. They have 2 guys who fit that role. Hopefully a couple of those, high upside, low floor guys we mentioned earlier take that leap, and then maybe they have a couple more. They obviously have 3 first-round picks coming in next year's draft, 3 potentially early seconds. So they're going to have more prospects hopefully getting added to the pipeline in the next 12 months. Point being, though, is that I don't know if they want to be simultaneously trying to crack the Drysdale code and also find ways to integrate a probably too young defenseman into the NHL.
We all silly like the mayor.